Ethical issues in healthcare. Managing controversial and ethical issues in practice. Discuss the issues in a manner that it is as objective and non judgmental as possible. Ensure patients have full access to relevant and necessary information to make informed decisions about their care. Identify if any options are outside of the physician's moral boundaries, for example, something to which the physician has a conscientious objection, and refer to another physician if appropriate. Consult with the bioethicist and/or the appropriate ethics committees or boards. Protect freedom of moral choice for students or trainees. Reproductive technologies. Reproductive technologies may be assessed by people of all genders. For example, a female to male transgender man with a uterus may become pregnant. Please note that use of the words maternal, mother, and woman may refer to gender diverse individuals. Overview of the maternal fetal considerations. Medical legally, maternal body and fetal body are considered one. In general, maternal and fetal interests align. However, maternal health takes precedence. Ethical issues and arguments. Principle of reproductive freedom. Pregnant individuals have the right to reproductive choice. Coercion of a gestating individual to accept medical advice is an unacceptable infringement of their personal autonomy. Canada's colonial history includes a legacy of infringement of reproductive rights, both rhetorical and practical. Therefore, engaging in conversation with patients around their reproductive rights must be done in a well-informed and patient-centered manner. The Tri-Council Policy Statement. 1. Genetic treatment aimed at altering germ cells is prohibited in Canada and elsewhere. 2. Embryo research is permitted up to 14 days post-fertilization. 3. Embryos created for reproductive purposes that are no longer required may be used. 4. Gamete providers must give free and informed consent for research use. 5. No commercial transactions in the creation and use of the embryos are permitted. 6. Creation of embryos solely for research purposes is prohibited. 7. Human cloning is strictly prohibited. 8. Risks of coercion must be minimized, that is, the fertility treatment team may not be pressured to generate more embryos than necessary. 9. One may only discuss the option of using fetal tissue for research after the patient makes a free and informed choice to have a therapeutic abortion. And 10. Physicians responsible for fertility treatment may not be part of a stem cell research team. Legal issues and arguments. The law protects a gestating individual's right to life, liberty, and security of person. Key aspects of the gestating individual's rights include an individual with capacity has the right to consent or refuse medical recommendations regardless of whether or not they are gestating. The fetus does not have legal rights until it is born alive and with complete delivery. A pregnant person with comorbid substance use disorder cannot be detained and treated to protect the fetus. Winnipeg Child and Family Services, Northwest Area. 1997. A fetus is not a human being within the meaning of the Criminal Code of Canada. Thus, medical negligence during delivery resulting in the death of a fetus that has not been born alive does not constitute criminal negligence causing death, manslaughter, and cannot attract criminal penalties. Harvey Sullivan. Royal Commission on New Reproductive Technologies, 1993 recommendations. Medical treatment must never be imposed upon a competent pregnant woman against her wishes. No law should be used to confine a pregnant woman in the interest of her fetus. 3. The conduct of a pregnant woman in relation to her fetus should not be criminalized. 4. Child welfare should never be used to control a woman's behavior during pregnancy. And 5. Civil liability should never be imposed upon a woman for harm done to her fetus during pregnancy. Examples involving the use of established guidelines. A person is permitted to refuse HIV testing during pregnancy, even if vertical transmission to fetus results. However, once the baby is born, breastfeeding and even theoretical transmission of HIV may attract criminal liability. This area of law is unsettled. A person is permitted to refuse cesarean delivery in labor that is not progressing despite evidence of fetal distress. Assisted reproductive therapies includes non-coital insemination, hormonal ovarian stimulation, and IVF. Topics with ethical concerns surrounding assisted reproductive therapies, ART. Donor anonymity versus child-centered reproduction, that is, knowledge about genetic medical history. Pre-implantation genetic testing for diagnosis before pregnancy. Use of new techniques without patients appreciating their experimental nature. Embryo status. The Supreme Court of Canada maintains that fetuses are unique but not persons under law. This view would likely apply to embryos as well. Access to assisted reproductive therapies, ART. Private versus public funding of ART. Social factors limiting access to ART, for example, same-sex couples. The commercialization of reproduction. Fetal tissue. Pluripotent stem cells can currently be derived from human embryonic and fetal tissue. Use of stem cells in research is reviewed by the Stem Cell Oversight Committee as part of the CIHR. Potential uses of stem cells in research. Studying human development and factors that direct cell specialization. Evaluating drugs for efficacy and safety in human models. Cell therapy, using stem cells grown in vitro to repair or replace degenerated, destroyed malignant tissues, for example, in Parkinson's disease. Genetic treatment aimed at altering somatic cells, for example, myocardial and immunological cells, is acceptable and ongoing. Induced abortion. CMA definition of induced abortion: the active termination of a pregnancy before fetal viability. Fetus bigger than 500 grams or bigger than 20 weeks gestational age. CMA policy on induced abortion. 1. Induced abortion should not be used as an alternative to contraception. 2. Counseling on contraception must be readily available. 3. Full and immediate counseling services must be provided in the event of unwanted pregnancy. 4. There should be no delay in the provision of abortion services. 5. No patient should be compelled to have a pregnancy terminated. 6. Physicians should not be compelled to participate in abortion. If morally opposed, the physician should inform the patient so she may consult another physician. The CPSO requires physicians to provide an effective referral. 7. No discrimination should be directed towards either physicians who do not perform or assist at induced abortions or physicians who do. 8. Induced abortion should be uniformly available to all women in Canada, and health care insurance should cover all the costs. Note: the upper limit of gestational age for which coverage is provided varies between provinces. 9. Elective termination of pregnancy after fetal viability may be indicated under exceptional circumstances. Ethical and legal concerns and arguments. In Canada, there is no criminal prohibition regarding abortion. It is a person's medical decision to be made in consultation with whom they wish. There is no mandatory role for spouse, family. Second and third trimester abortions are not illegal in Canada, but are usually only carried out when there are serious risks to the person's health, or if the fetus has died in utero or has major malformations, for example, anencephaly. Medical termination of pregnancy is the standard up to 9 weeks gestational age, with surgical methods of varying degrees of invasiveness used subsequently. Prenatal, antenatal genetic testing uses: 1. To confirm a clinical diagnosis. 2. To detect genetic predisposition to a disease. 3. Allows preventative steps to be taken and helps patient prepare for the future. 4. Gives parents the option to terminate a pregnancy or begin early treatment. Ethical dilemmas arise because of the sensitive nature of genetic information. Important considerations of genetic testing include individual and familial implications, its pertinence to future disease, its ability to identify disorders for which there are no effective treatments or preventive steps, its ability to identify the sex of the fetus. Ethical issues and arguments regarding the use of prenatal, antenatal genetic testing include: obtaining informed consent is difficult due to the complexity of genetic information, physicians' duty to maintain confidentiality versus duty to warn family members, risk of social discrimination, for example, insurance, and psychological harm. Legal aspects. No current specific legislation exists. Testing requires informed consent. No standard of care exists for clinical genetics, but physicians are legally obliged to inform patients that prenatal testing exists and is available. A physician may be able to breach confidentiality in order to warn family members about a condition if harm can possibly be prevented via treatment or prevention. In general, the patient's consent is required unless the harm to be avoided is sufficiently serious to rise to the level of imminent risk of serious bodily harm or death. That is, not a chronic condition, but an acute life-threatening condition. Genetic testing, ethically appropriate actions. Thorough discussion and realistic planning with patient before testing is done, and genetic counseling for delivery of complex information. That's it. Next video, we'll talk about end-of-life care.